Right now, you think you're choosing to watch this video. You believe you decided to click on it, to sit here, to pay attention. You feel like you're in control of your thoughts, your actions, your life. But what if I told you that's an illusion? What if every decision you've ever made, every choice you thought was yours, was actually predetermined by the laws of physics? I'm Richard Feynman, and I've spent my life studying the fundamental nature of reality, from quantum mechanics to thermodynamics. And I'm about to present you with an argument that will collapse everything you believe about yourself, your choices, and your control over your own life. Free will, the idea that you are the author of your actions, does not exist. Not as you understand it. And once you see the proof, once you truly grasp what I'm about to show you, you can never unsee it. This will be uncomfortable. This will challenge your deepest sense of self. But the truth doesn't care about comfort. Are you ready to have your reality collapsed? Let's begin. Let me start with a simple question. What are you? Strip away the poetry, the philosophy, the comfortable stories we tell ourselves. What are you, fundamentally? You are matter. You are atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, arranged in a particular configuration. You are approximately 7 octillion atoms organized into molecules, cells, tissues, organs, systems. You are a biological machine, a physical system operating according to the laws of nature. Now here's the critical question. Do the atoms in your brain follow different laws of physics than the atoms in a rock? The answer is no, they don't. The same fundamental forces that govern the motion of planets, the behavior of gases, the decay of radioactive elements, these same forces govern the atoms in your brain. Your neurons fire according to electrochemical processes. Ions flow across membranes following concentration gradients and electrical potentials. Neurotransmitters bind to receptors based on molecular geometry and chemical affinity. Every single process in your brain follows the deterministic laws of physics and chemistry. So here's the uncomfortable question. If your brain is a physical system following physical laws, where exactly does choice enter the picture? Let me take you back to the early 19th century to a mathematician named Pierre-Simon Laplace. He proposed what's now called Laplace's demon, a thought experiment that perfectly captures the deterministic universe. Imagine, Laplace said, an intellect that knew the precise position and momentum of every atom in the universe at a given moment. If this intellect also knew all the laws of physics, it could calculate the entire future and past of the universe with perfect accuracy. Why? Because in a deterministic universe, the present completely determines the future. Given the exact state of all particles right now and the laws governing their interactions, there's only one possible future. Everything that will ever happen is already implicit in the current state of affairs. Think of it like billiard balls on a table. If you know the exact position, velocity, and spin of every ball, and you know the laws of physics governing collisions, you can predict with certainty where every ball will end up. The balls have no choice in the matter. Their future is completely determined by their current state and the laws of motion. Your brain is made of particles. Those particles follow laws. Those laws are deterministic. Therefore, everything your brain does, every thought, every decision, every action, is completely determined by prior states. You feel like you're making choices, but that feeling is itself just another deterministic process in your brain. It's an experience generated by neural activity, which is itself determined by prior neural activity, which traces back through an unbroken causal chain to the initial conditions of the universe. You are not choosing your actions. Your actions are inevitable consequences of prior causes. Now let me show you the experimental evidence that demolishes the illusion of free will. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that sent shockwaves through philosophy and neuroscience. He asked subjects to perform a simple action, flex their finger or wrist whenever they felt the spontaneous urge to do so. He asked them to note the exact moment they became aware of their intention to move. Meanwhile, he was monitoring their brain activity with electrodes measuring something called the readiness potential, a buildup of electrical activity that precedes voluntary movements. What he found was devastating to the concept of free will. The readiness potential appeared about 550 milliseconds before the actual movement. But subjects only reported becoming consciously aware of their intention to move about 200 milliseconds before the movement. Think about what that means. The brain was already preparing to move. The decision was already being made at an unconscious level, about 350 milliseconds before the person became consciously aware of deciding to move. The conscious experience of deciding came after the brain had already initiated the decision-making process. The feeling of free will, the sensation of choosing, was a post hoc experience, not the cause of the action. You didn't decide to move your finger. Your unconscious brain decided to move your finger, and then, a third of a second later, it generated the conscious experience of having made that decision. This has been replicated and extended in countless studies. In 2008, neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes and colleagues used fMRI to show they could predict a subject's decision up to 10 seconds before the subject became consciously aware of making the decision. They could literally read the decision in the brain activity before the person made the decision. Your conscious mind is not making decisions. It's being informed of decisions that have already been made by unconscious processes. Let's go deeper into how your brain actually works, because understanding the mechanism will make the absence of free will even clearer. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each neuron can form thousands of connections with other neurons, creating a network of roughly 100 trillion synapses. Thoughts, decisions, actions all emerge from patterns of electrical and chemical activity in this network. When you make a decision, here's what's actually happening. Sensory information comes in from your environment. This information is processed through multiple layers of neural networks. These networks have been shaped by your genetics, which you didn't choose, your past experiences, which you didn't choose, they just happened to you, and your current neurochemical state, which you don't consciously control. Based on all of this input, none of which you chose, certain neural pathways activate more strongly than others. The pattern of activation that emerges is what we call a decision. But this pattern was completely determined by the inputs and the current state of the network. You didn't choose the inputs. You didn't choose your genetic predispositions. You didn't choose your past experiences. You didn't choose how your experiences shaped your neural networks. You didn't choose your current neurochemical state. So what exactly did you choose? The feeling of choosing is real. It's a genuine neural experience. But it's not causing your actions. It's a byproduct of the decision-making process, an experience generated after the fact to create a coherent narrative of agency. Think of it this way. When you see a complex computer program running, making decisions, responding to inputs, you don't imagine the program has free will. You understand it's following its code, processing inputs according to algorithms. The program doesn't choose its outputs. The outputs are determined by the code and the inputs. Your brain is vastly more complex than any computer program we've created, but the principle is the same. You are running on biological software, neural networks shaped by evolution, genetics, and experience. You don't choose how this software operates. You are the operation of this software. Now, some people try to rescue free will by pointing to quantum mechanics. They say, but Feynman, you're a quantum physicist. You know quantum mechanics is indeterministic. There's randomness at the quantum level. Maybe that randomness gives us free will. Let me be very clear. Quantum indeterminacy does not rescue free will. If anything, it makes the situation worse. Yes, it's true that quantum mechanics introduces fundamental randomness into the universe. At the quantum level, certain events are truly random, not just unpredictable in practice, but fundamentally indeterminate. An electron's position isn't determined until it's measured. A radioactive atom's decay time is genuinely random. But here's the problem. Randomness is not freedom. Randomness is not choice. If your decisions are determined by prior causes, you don't have free will. But if your decisions are random, you also don't have free will. You're just replacing deterministic causation with random chance. Imagine I told you, your next decision will be determined by a coin flip. Would you feel like you had free will? Of course not. The coin flip is random, but it's not you making a choice. It's chance making the choice for you. Adding quantum randomness to your brain doesn't give you agency. It just means some of your neural processes are influenced by random quantum events. That doesn't make you the author of your actions, it just makes you partially random. Free will requires that you be the ultimate source of your actions, that your choices originate with you in some meaningful sense. But quantum mechanics doesn't provide that. It just adds dice rolls to the mix. So we're left with two options. Either brain processes are deterministic, determined by prior causes, or they're partially random, influenced by quantum uncertainty. Neither option gives you free will. Neither option makes you the true author of your choices. Let me make this even more concrete by examining where your choices actually come from. Consider your preferences, your values, your personality, all the things that guide your decisions. Where did they come from? Your genetics, which you didn't choose, influence everything from your baseline temperament to your susceptibility to addiction to your cognitive abilities. Twin studies have shown that genetics accounts for roughly 50% of the variation in most personality traits. Your early childhood experiences, which you didn't choose, shaped your neural development during critical periods. The attachment style you developed with your caregivers, the traumas you may have experienced, the language you learned, the culture you absorbed, all of this wired your brain in particular ways. Your accumulated life experiences, which you didn't choose they happened to you, continuously modified your neural networks. Every success and failure, every relationship, every piece of information you encountered, all of it shaped who you are. Your current biological state, which you don't consciously control, your hormone levels, your neurotransmitter balance, your gut microbiome, whether you're hungry or tired, all of this influences your decision-making from moment to moment. Now, faced with a decision, your brain processes information based on all of these factors. The choice that emerges is the inevitable result of these inputs. But you didn't choose any of the inputs. You didn't choose the processing system. You didn't choose how the system responds to the inputs. It's like asking a computer to choose its output when you've already written all its code and determined all its inputs. The output is inevitable. The choice is an illusion. So if free will is an illusion, why does it feel so real? Why are we all so convinced that we're making genuine choices? The answer lies in evolutionary psychology. The feeling of free will, the experience of being an autonomous agent making choices, is incredibly useful for survival, even if it's not true. Think about it. If you didn't feel like you were in control of your actions, if you didn't feel responsible for your decisions, you wouldn't bother deliberating, planning, or trying to improve yourself. You'd be functionally passive. But feeling like you're in control motivates you to think through problems, to consider consequences, to learn from mistakes. Even though these processes are themselves deterministic, the subjective experience of agency makes them more effective. Natural selection didn't optimize for truth, it optimized for survival and reproduction. The feeling of free will is a useful fiction that evolution programmed into us because it enhanced our ancestors' fitness. Your brain constructs a narrative of agency, of you as the protagonist making choices. Because that narrative structure is useful for navigating the social world, for learning from experience, for coordinating actions over time. But just because a belief is useful doesn't make it true. The Earth feeling stationary doesn't make it stationary. The sun appearing to move across the sky doesn't mean the sun is moving. And the feeling of making free choices doesn't mean you're actually making free choices. The sense of free will is a user interface, not reality. It's a simplified model your brain constructs, because the truth that you're a deterministic biological machine would be too cognitively expensive and motivationally problematic to deal with. Now let's address the philosophical counterarguments, because philosophers have been debating this for millennia. Some philosophers advocate compatibilism, the idea that free will and determinism can coexist. They define free will not as the ability to have done otherwise in identical circumstances, but as the ability to act according to your desires without external coercion. By this definition, you have free will as long as you're doing what you want to do, even if what you want is determined by prior causes. But this is just word games. It's redefining free will to mean something completely different from what people actually mean when they talk about free will. When people say they have free will, they mean they could have genuinely chosen differently. They mean that in that exact moment, with everything exactly the same, they had multiple possible futures available, and they selected one. But that's not possible in a deterministic universe. Given an exact state of affairs, only one future is possible. You couldn't have chosen differently because everything about you, your neural state, your memories, your values, was exactly as it was, and that state could only produce one output. Compatibilism is trying to salvage the comforting feeling of free will by changing what the term means. But it doesn't address the fundamental problem. You are not the ultimate source of your actions. You are not the unmoved mover. You are a link in an infinite causal chain. Now comes the most important question. If free will doesn't exist, how should we live? What are the implications? First, let me be clear. Understanding that free will is an illusion doesn't mean you become passive or nihilistic. You still have desires, goals, preferences. You still deliberate and plan. Those processes still happen, they're just deterministic processes, not magical acts of free choice. But this understanding should fundamentally change several things. 1. Compassion and understanding. When you truly internalize that people's actions are the inevitable results of their genetics, experiences, and circumstances, factors they didn't choose, it becomes much harder to hate them. It doesn't mean their actions aren't harmful and shouldn't be prevented, but the personal animosity, the moral outrage, the feeling that they deserve suffering, these diminish. Someone who commits a terrible crime is, in a very real sense, unlucky. They're unlucky to have the genes they have, unlucky to have the childhood they had, unlucky to have the brain state that led to that action. They're still dangerous and need to be prevented from causing harm, but the vindictive desire to make them suffer loses its justification. 2. Humility. You can't take ultimate credit for your successes because you didn't choose the factors that led to those successes. You didn't choose your genes, your intelligence, your conscientiousness, your opportunities. You worked hard? You didn't choose your capacity for hard work. That was given to you by factors beyond your control. This should make you more humble, more grateful, more willing to share the benefits of your good fortune with others who were less lucky in the lottery of genetics and circumstance. 3. Criminal justice reform. Our entire criminal justice system is built on the assumption of free will and moral responsibility. We punish people because we believe they deserve it, because they could have chosen differently. But if free will doesn't exist, punishment as retribution makes no sense. We should still protect society from dangerous individuals, but we should do so through quarantine and rehabilitation, not vengeance. The goal should be preventing future harm and reforming behavior, not inflicting suffering because people deserve it. 4. Gratitude and acceptance. When good things happen to you, you can be grateful for your good fortune without the guilt of thinking you don't deserve it. When bad things happen, you can accept them as the inevitable result of causal chains beyond your control, without the added suffering of feeling like you should have chosen differently. Let me bring this all together. Free will does not exist in the way you think it does. You are a physical system governed by physical laws. Your decisions are the inevitable results of prior causes, your genetics, your experiences, your current brain state, none of which you ultimately chose. The feeling of free will is real. The experience of making choices is real. But these are experiences generated by your brain, not evidence of some magical ability to transcend causation. This is not a comfortable truth. It collapses the narrative of yourself as the autonomous author of your life. It undermines notions of ultimate moral responsibility, of deserving praise or blame, of being self-made. But here's what I find beautiful about this truth. It's liberating. You're no longer burdened with the impossible task of being the ultimate source of your actions. You're no longer tormented by the question of why you can't just choose to be different, when the answer is that you were always going to be exactly as you are. You can work to change yourself, to improve, to grow. But you can do so with the understanding that this work is itself part of the causal chain, not a magical act of will transcending that chain. You can appreciate the good in your life without guilt. You can face the bad in your life without self-recrimination. You can see others with compassion, understanding that they, like you, are doing what they must given what they are. The universe is a deterministic unfolding of cause and effect, with perhaps some quantum randomness mixed in. You are a temporary pattern in that unfolding, a brief organization of matter that achieves consciousness and looks out at the cosmos in wonder. You don't control the pattern. You are the pattern, and the pattern was always going to be exactly what it is. There's a Zen koan that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The same applies here. Before understanding that free will is an illusion, you deliberate, make decisions, take actions. After understanding it, you still deliberate, make decisions, take action. The difference is the story you tell yourself about what's happening. And that story, that shift from the illusion of agency to the reality of determinism, changes everything about how you relate to yourself, to others, and to the universe. Your reality has collapsed. You are not who you thought you were. You are not in control in the way you believed. But you're still here. You're still experiencing. You're still part of this magnificent, mysterious unfolding of existence. And that, I think, is more than enough. Thank you. Now go forth, not with the burden of free will, but with the freedom of understanding what you actually are. A beautiful, temporary pattern in the eternal dance of cause and effect.